Henry, welcome to the podcast. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, and I'm very grateful for you having me on. Thank you so much, Jesse.
Well, I'm really grateful for you taking the time to come on the show. I was telling you before we jumped on and hit record here, I loved your memoir. I just actually finished it this morning before we jumped on the call. It's a long one, but you just cover so much in there, and you've lived such an incredible journey. And I'm hoping we can go through a lot of that today and cover it because I read a lot of books to prepare for interviews for this show, and yours just had me captivated, wanting to come back for more, back for more. So your writing is beautiful, and I want to commend you on that.
Oh, that's very, very kind. It, warms my heart to hear it. Thank you so much. It wasn't a book that I really kind of expected to write. Actually, I'd been a professional writer for decades, a couple of decades since I was quite young, and then I stopped and got very busy, basically teaching meditation, and I wasn't really planning to write another book, and this one just kind of came in bits and pieces, and I let it do that, and that's the result. And obviously it's just great to hear if it's resonating and helping in any way.
And because this book is about you and your life, and it's so raw and so real, I haven't read your other poems and your other books to date. I'm definitely excited to get into those now. But I'm assuming this was a different type of writing for you. And if so, was it harder to write, so personally and so rawly?
I think sort of as a poet, I'd had some practice at that, with poems that were quite personal, and also, personal material kind of going into some of my fiction. But this one just came very naturally. Actually, it came in bits and pieces. So I never really. There were times when it was on the road to being published, and I thought, oh my, is that wise? To put that out there, and this gruesome secret or whatever. But I mean, I really follow the principle of, what is sometimes called a shame attack. I don't know if you know that phrase where you it's a therapeutic thing some people do, where you deliberately do something that would be kind of embarrassing, not harmful or sort of challenging in that kind of way, but challenging to your own pride or your own sense of how you want people to perceive you. It's a therapeutic thing. They call it a shame attack because it attacks your sense of shame. So I figured this whole book is a shame attack,
It sounds very stoic.
It probably is. I mean, I picked it up from Albert Ellis, who was a great pioneer of cognitive behavior therapy, and who built his whole system from the Stoics, actually. He would encourage people to do things like, you're riding the subway and just you call out the stops, 42nd Street, say it nice and loud, I mean, nobody can sort of, you're not doing anything wrong, but man, it can be quite embarrassing, and it's a very good exercise to see, can I be okay with myself, no matter what people may think of me?
You gave that subway example. Have you ever done anything like that in real life?
I have, absolutely. And another one was like you're on an elevator and you call out the floors when the elevator stops. It's kind of scary, because you think, how are people going to react? But 17th floor. It's like, why did this guy say that? Is he crazy? Whatever. You just stand there and they think whatever they want to think. And it's, you sort of control your own shame. You recognize that you are the creator of your own sense of shame, and so why not create it? And I found it a very helpful exercise myself. That was at some point in my journey, I was doing that kind of therapy. And that was a really important exercise for me because I'd had quite a lot of shame as a young man. I don't know. Maybe we'll get to that in the course of the conversation. But it's a common issue, I think, these days. I see it more and more in young people growing up with, expectations of high performance, high achievement, some kind of perfectionistic aspirations. And the flip side of that is like, if I don't do well enough, I'm no good and I'm defective, and that's shame. And I feel personally that actually, the path that I've been on myself was, in one dimension of it was really investigating shame and how to heal it and how to not be so in thrall to it.
And besides the example you gave, any other exercises have been really profound in your journey that have helped you along the way?
On the shame front, I mean, there's that kind of thing, and there's many more, well-known sort of shame attack things that people have written about, but I think, at a sort of another level, it's about how do we heal a lack of self-acceptance. And I mean, for me, my meditative journey was the way, really getting deep into kinds of quiet, focused, deep, concentrated states where it's possible to start exposing deep assumptions that we make about ourselves and start to track this deep level of thinking, and see it for what it is and release it and be liberated from it. That's all part of the path of awakening, I would say. It's got this sort of healing dimension to it. So, not exactly, I mean, that's kind of a bigger, it's not like a single exercise. It's a whole path that I view it these days as like a journey into love, basically. And that has a big component of that is self-love. I see self-love as something that is necessary if you want to have any love in your life, actually. I don't know that that's a popular thing to say because, it might sound selfish, it might sound self-centered, self-serving even, but I believe that self-love, cherishing oneself, sort of nurturing oneself, being kind to oneself, is the gateway to being truly kind and cherishing of others, kind to them, cherishing of them, deeply appreciative. I think unless we've got this current of warm, self-love, dare I call it that, moving through us, unless that's moving through us and we're feeling it now, we're kind of slightly dead to the world, no matter what our best intentions may be. That to have the actual experience of this warm energy in our heart area. I mean, you can feel it right now if you want. You can see, is my heart warm now? Has it got a warm current? It's like a sort of almost a gentle, electric charge, or it's like a fountain, a spring gently welling up. It can be with us all the time, and if it's not with us, which it probably often isn't for many of us, myself included, we would, that's typically because we're engaging in this thought loops that we have on the level of thought, the level of filtering everything through the mind and kind of engaging with what the mind thinks it wants. And that takes us to the whole egoic structure. But actually, the way of sort of reprogramming is a lot of people. I'm sorry, Jesse, I'm jumping around a bit, but just
No,
bear
this
with me.
is good. Take this tangent and roll.
I mean, a lot of people who come to spiritual practice, whether it's mindfulness or awakening, they're interested in awakening. What the hell is that? Whatever. There's this notion you pick up that somehow the self is a problem. and that I got to see through myself. I got to get over myself. I got to get rid of myself. Then all will be well. And I'll, actually, I don't think that's quite right. I think that it's true that in some sense, the normal ways we function as a self and believe ourselves to be a self, if we're completely entranced by that, yeah, it'll generate an unhappy life, and it'll be an obstacle to optimal mental health, I would say. And I want to bring that in because we're on the ultimate health quest here, and that must include mental health, I assume. Um, but the path, it's paradoxical. You don't try to get rid of anything. Actually, learning to love yourself is the way that we soften the self. We soften it, we melt it, we warm it. It's more like dissolving, let's say, I don't know, I got this image of a pad of butter in a pan, and you don't want to burn the butter, but you put on a low heat, gradually the butter melts. So that warmth is the warmth of our growing awareness, our capacity to be more aware through path of practice, of meditation, whatever. And as that awareness grows, the sense of self becomes less of a rock, less of a nugget, less of a hard thing in the middle of us. And it starts to melt. And that it's melting through love, really. And it starts to realize that it itself can be very loving. We can live in a way that has this current of love running through our day. What a thing, how amazing, what a privilege to have that and be aware of it. It's a beautiful human, exceptional gift, Anyway, sorry, I've been talking too much.
No, that's beautiful. I'm glad you went deep into that. And I'm just curious, is the way to get there, does it all come back to meditation and mindfulness? Or are there other different adjuncts to that you have in the mix that can bring in that love?
I guess I have to talk a little bit from what I've experienced myself. I wouldn't at all believe that meditation is the only way. I really find that very unlikely. And that mindfulness, cultivating greater mindfulness, greater awareness is the only way. I doubt that. But at the same time, I think it's almost like, the way I see it these days is almost like there's kind of different levels of growth, healing, expansion, and love for us humans. And there's the love of family, friends, nearest and dearest. Obviously there's romantic love, but that's almost like kind of a separate, odd little category, I think. But maybe we'll just put that on the shelf for the moment. But there's interpersonal love, there's love for our work, and all these kinds of love have challenges in them. If they were easy, really, they wouldn't be about love. Love is very much, I think, about sort of facing, in spite of, I still love this, and I don't know that there's any form of work, I haven't found it, that is nothing but absorbing and inspiring. I think every kind of work has got some challenges in it, and it should do, and it's got drudgery in it probably, and things times we'd rather not be doing it. And if it didn't, our love for it wouldn't be worth anything. And actually, oddly, it's the same with meditation. Mostly these days, a lot of people meditate or want to meditate. If they don't, they think some think they can't do it. Some think they're not built right to do it. And everybody can do it if they want to. It's not something that, it's very, very rare that anybody has a temperament that's kind of a gift that means they're sort of gifted at it. I don't think so, really. Everybody's got these thought loops and difficult emotions, and and that's why we have a practice like meditation. Um, but it is not. These days, a lot of people think, well, I'll do it and get these results that I want. And so I'm doing it because it'll give me X, Y, and Z or Z. But actually, yeah, that's true. But again, it's paradoxical because in a way, you can come to value your practice more because you sit through it regardless, even when it's difficult, even when it's challenging and you're grinding through minutes or hours on the cushion, on the seat, meditating, and it seems really unrewarding. You do it anyway, and you do it day after day and year after year. And that kind of steady, long commitment is like an act of love. And that's when you start to really get stuff back from it. It starts helping us grow as human beings. We grow, we become slightly larger in our awareness, in our capacity for embracing and welcoming and being with. And so that's a real form of love, I think. You see what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
not just
definitely.
getting.
It's your people. You mentioned one thing that stuck out as you're speaking there and talking about people doing it for the result. We're also doing it oftentimes at the minimal required dose because there's so many different apps now for the phones where you can meditate 10 minutes a day and do these guided meditations. It's all become very simplified. And how little do we have to do on a regular basis to get, like you said, the result from it? So I'd be really curious to hear someone, you've been in this world for so long and taken meditation. And when we get to your story, we're going to get deep into that and share what you've been through. But somebody who's been so committed to this for so long, how do you feel about, again, these apps coming out and so many people getting into meditation for the result, trying to do the minimum dose? How does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I know. I mean, well, I mean, I think it's fair. It's fair to say, there just are different levels of engagement with it. It's like just like anything. Like if somebody wants to go jogging once a week, fine, no problem. If somebody wants to, but if somebody wants to do a marathon, it's a whole different training program. And it's maybe a little bit analogous with meditation that yeah, probably. If you just are still and you let yourself be guided through a nice sit for 10 minutes a day, undoubtedly, that's going to be a positive thing. I have no doubt about it. So I think, the apps are great. I think I come from this world, where of deep traditional, approach to awakening, where it's like the practice is an alternative to the marketplace. It's like most people are, one way or another, caught up in commerce and the marketplace and getting and gaining and spending. And this practice is a world that allows you to step away from that, to let go of all thoughts of gain and really enter a kind of alternate economy that's not about getting and spending, as the poet Wordsworth called it. So one side of the app business is that basically meditation is being turned into a business, into an industry, $1 billion industry already. And that's a little bit worrying to me because there's something so precious about it being free of that. It really being this, it's not that it's sort of pure or something, it's just that it's such a relief to people to know that there's an alternative to the commercial economy. There's another engagement you can have in your life that's not part of that. So that's one issue with meditation apps. Another, I don't know quite how to put this, but I think it's great to have guided meditation, and I use them myself at times. I also create them to some extent on some. I've done it on the Waking Up app, Sam Harris's app, and people say they're really useful. And we have some in our website, mountaincloud.org. But there's something else as well about just sitting with yourself. The real sort of classic meditation is not guided from, wall to wall, from beginning to end. The real experience of meditation, somehow, I feel, is you're on your own. It's you and yourself and the universe. And somehow that's missing if every time you sit, somebody's leading you through it. So like I say, it depends what you want from it. If you just want, that minimum effective dose, and if you're getting that, you can feel the benefit. 10 minutes a day, plugging into the phone and getting a hit that somebody leads you through, great. But that's like, it's like the difference between a swimming pool or a lap pool and doing a few laps in the lap pool. Then there's a bigger pool, like an Olympic pool. You could do, 50-meter lengths. Then and it goes, 5 meters deep at the deep end. And then there's a pond. You can swim wild in a pond. Then there's a lake. Whoa, you could actually swim in a lake. It's got waves and, you can't see the other side. And then there's mighty rivers, flowing down to connect with the sea. And then there's the sea and the ocean. It's like there's different engagement with the great ocean of life, of being alive, of the universe, of being an existing being in this vast universe, And if somebody's just guiding you through a sort of body scan or a breath meditation or whatever, you're right in the very, very, it's almost like you're in a hot tub, but there's an ocean. You see what I mean, Jesse? Does that make sense?
I do. And I like the idea of maybe coming from these apps. I'm sure it happens all the time where people jump in, they get in the hot tub, and then they realize there's the ocean. And this could be that first step that wouldn't have happened otherwise, because again, there are so many different apps and it's becoming such a thing, meditation as a whole. So, and again, no right or wrong. Everybody has their own goals with meditation and their own paths. I mean, you've dedicated a good part of your life to this Zen meditation. And again, we're going to get into that. But that's one path. And then there's people that want to use this as a tool to facilitate a different path.
Yeah, exactly.
And another aspect too, reading your book, was talking about all the other aspects of meditation that you wouldn't get from an app. Like you share the one story of waiting out on a cold morning and a friend picked you up to go to, I think it was a retreat, or it might have just been a day meditation. I'm not sure, but just, you can imagine the stories that you would tell with that friend on the way there, and sharing different epiphanies you might have had during the meditation on the way back together, and just meeting with the community before and after the class started, and just creating, it's much more of a commitment, just the fact that you're creating, say, that whole day or multiple days out of your schedule. You're going all in on it. It's a different level of commitment, which is, I'm sure it provides a different array of benefits.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I'd say like sort of the community is absolutely key. And, at some point, maybe we want to have a live flesh and blood guide. That can be absolutely key. It was for me. Yeah, broadly speaking, you could say that one side of motivation for practice is kind of therapeutic, and it could be also to sort of enhance performance one way or another, to focus better, to sleep better, to whatever, and have better interactions and be less reactive. That's one whole totally valid and important side of why people come to meditate. And then there's another whole side, which is more and more, it seems to me, people are interested in what on earth is this thing called awakening that I keep hearing about, waking up. Even enlightenment, they used to call it, what does that mean? And is that something I'm deeply curious about, like a whole different way of experiencing this very moment is available to me? But I don't know what it is or how, but I sense that there's more to life, that somehow my way of living as this kind of little capsule that's seeking certain things and trying to avoid certain other things, sort of a stick behind me, a carrot in front of me. Somehow all through life I've been feeling like that. I'm on this rail trying to get stuff and avoid stuff. And is that really the only way to live, cradle to grave? And what is this journey of life? What is this being human, having this most unbelievable thing, human consciousness, just being aware in this moment? Now, I am aware. I'm sitting, I'm listening, I'm seeing, I'm feeling sensations. What is this? It's the most miraculous thing, really. Do I want to investigate it more deeply? Because you can.
Well, one thing I found just from reading your book is that, and again, I've just finished it, so I haven't had a lot of time to play with this, but it's brought me to the present moment just in little ways, like when I'm interacting with somebody or just paying more attention to my surroundings. So it's almost like through your journey and reading that, I'm able to have some kind of micro experience. I wouldn't call it enlightenment or anything in a major way, but it's definitely, and again, there's the stickiness factor, and we can talk about this maybe later too. I've just finished a book. How long will that last? But I'm definitely more in the present moment now and appreciating the things like the taste of a sip of tea and just the act of making a tea and just how present I am here with you during this conversation. It's changed me in a small way, which is I'm grateful for.
Well, I'm very grateful that you share that, and I'm happy to hear it. Yeah, and I think it's a real possibility to have that more and more consistently. It's very real possibility.
I'd like that. Well, let's get into your story because this is going to open a whole bunch of other doors, and we keep alluding to it. So let's take it all the way back, Henry. And you talk about this near the beginning of your book. You've had eczema since around 6 months old. So this has been something you've carried, I'm sure, as far back as your earliest memories. So talk about those earliest memories with eczema and how that impacted you.
Yeah. Actually, by the way, I haven't touched wood. I've been free of it for maybe 25, 30 years now. And I'm now 58. But it was a difficult way to start life. I had it very eczema is this sort of skin problem. I mean, people, I think probably a lot of people have some idea what it is, but it's, in my case, it wasn't just like a rash. It was very bad. I was sometimes as a child in hospital, and having to put on creams and ointments and things every night, and kind of get bathed in antiseptic and antibacterial soaps and stuff, and it's very uncomfortable. It itches very intensely. I mean, like, really, really intensely. It hurts. It's a difficult thing to live with if it's bad. And my heart goes out to so many people. I think I read a statistic that something like 30 million people in the US suffer from it. And so, and don't get better. I was very, very lucky, I think, that I I somehow came out of it. And I mean, my one aspect of my story is that meditation, I'm convinced anyway, helped me get better. I think it really meditation reordered my nervous system. And eczema is very stressful. I think my nervous system was in a really ragged state by the time I began meditating in my early to mid 20s. I'd been living in this kind of really frazzled body and nervous system. And when I started to give it these doses of quiet every day, I was doing actually TM style, Transcendental meditation, when I started, which had this stipulation: you've got to do 2 sessions every day of 20 minutes. It's a total of 40 minutes a day, 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening. And I'm really glad, actually, that they were so strict about that, because it set up the habit of a lifetime. And although I, for various reasons, after several years, kind of left TM for other kinds of meditation, that sort of, I guess you could call it self-discipline, never left me, and of just making time to sit every day. And the point. Sorry, I've just gone off track a little bit. I was just going to say that time of stillness in that dose really changed my nervous system. And I think because of that, it somehow interrupted the cycles that were making eczema so entrenched. And it started to get better. And it wasn't like sudden, it was significant, but over, the next few years, it was largely gone. And it's true, I also got smarter about diet. And I mean, that's, folks, anybody out here listening, anybody's listening who suffers from eczema, I assume you've already tried diet. Like, it really made a difference to me to not have dairy, to not have wheat, to not have citrus fruit. That alone was a big help, but it was a desperation coming out of my condition that made me, I think, probably so dedicated to the meditation, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, I do. I want to come back to TM and how you first stumbled upon that.
Well, I was doing a graduate degree actually in London. I was trying to do a PhD on the great Greek poet Homer. I was kind of a classics scholar, when I was younger, but and it was going really not well at all. I was really getting stressed about that on top of everything else. And I had a good friend, actually a couple of good friends, who both meditated, and they both did TM. And TM was this big thing. This is mid-80s, and it was the way that was widely known, in England anyway. And I think probably in the US it had a massive following, probably earlier in the US. So it was, if you were going to meditate, it was quite likely in those days that that's where you'd end up. And they actually it's quite expensive to learn, but they had a special deal for graduate students. And I knew that the Beatles had done it, so that kind of made it seem a little bit less outlandish. And they also were selling it as they called it a life tool for the busy. Like, it wasn't like they realized that meditation might have a kind of stigma of being like you're checking out from life or something. Not at all. They really wanted you to know that it was for people with busy careers. So that was encouraging as well, and it was a good experience. And I said it, I talk about it in the book, how much I slept when I started doing it. I went from the first week I had it, The first week I was meditating, I slept like insane amounts. It was almost, I had to stop going into college. I was sleeping so much. I was so exhausted for a week, like sleeping literally 20 hours a day. I thought there was something wrong with me. And then suddenly, boom, I woke up one morning so refreshed, like I hadn't felt in years, so clear and fresh. And it was like my nervous system had been carrying a tremendous fatigue, and it was so used to running on adrenaline and stress, suddenly it was refreshed. Oh, it was marvelous.
And did
That's
that
a
feeling
fruit
of
of meditation.
and did
Sorry, go
that
ahead.
feeling of being refreshed stick with you longer than, a day or two?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think I'd sort of, in their terminology, I had a sleep debt, and it had cleared, and so I was back on a more stable, balanced way of living, better regulated nervous system. And I think that was true. Yeah.
So before TM, did you have any experience with meditation at all? Did your parents meditate? Anybody else in your family? Were there any early, exposure to it?
I mean, a little bit. There was a there was a time my brother and I, he was older than me. We picked up a hitchhiker who who was a meditator, and he taught me actually right then and there to do a little Tibetan meditation in the back of the car, and I liked it actually. It was like we were on the English motorway, highway, driving through the rain. And I remember I was 14 years old, just sitting there cross legged, repeating this little phrase. I remember this sort of warm feeling coming on of feeling the motion of the car, hearing the rain, hearing the traffic. And it was really nice. It was peaceful. There was a kind of little bubble of peace and warmth. And I mean, looking back on it now, I might say I was getting a taste of the kind of intrinsic sense of lovingness that meditation can open us up to.
So coming back to the story, you're in graduate school, you learn TM, you go through that period of being really tired, your energy perks up. How does life change after that point? You're meditating regularly. How do things change with school and life in general?
Yeah, well, I actually, I think once I was in better shape, I realized that the PhD was kind of deeply problematic for me. I didn't feel I had the right temperament for the amount of um, scholarly, study, engagement, reading that was required. It didn't somehow feel quite right for me. And at the same time, I'd written a book already when I was a bit younger, and that book found a publisher, and I was, which was thrilling, of course it was, but the publisher wanted to know if I would want to do another book, and they were prepared to offer quite a substantial sort of advance, for a second book in addition to the first one that I hadn't yet written, but they were inviting me if I had ideas, and I did. I wanted to, so I accepted that and gave up the degree. Actually, by then I think I'd already got a job somewhere else, and I gave that up, and I went off. I started doing what I'd wanted to do since I was 14 years old, actually, which was be a kind of wandering writer, poet. And I started doing that. And for several years, quite a while, I lived as a traveling writer. I was very, very lucky, actually. I had some good publishers who were very supportive, and I had an incredible life. And for quite a while, and I was writing for magazines, and American magazines back then were paying what seemed to me as a youngish single man staggering amounts of money, and I could live from it quite easily. And So that was my life for quite a while. So that was very thrilling. And so it was very, very creative and whatever. And sorry, Jesse, am I on track? I've forgotten what your question was, actually.
No, no, that's great. And I know you talk about in the book how your parents were both scholars. So it must have been a really interesting time for you because you were, deciding not to finish school. But I know also writing books was a big part of acceptance in your family. So on one hand, you're getting into the writing, but on another hand, you're leaving school. So that must have been a really interesting time. How did your parents react?
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, for me to be writing poetry and being a sort of traveling writer, novelist, and writing travel stuff, that was almost kind of slightly rebellious, believe it or not, because it wasn't scholarly. We had a big sort of academic background in my family. Both my parents were professors at university, but actually they were very supportive. They really, I think they were just sort of relieved that I was in better health and that my career was kind of happening, even if it was a bit odd. At least it was happening. And yeah, I think they were pretty supportive.
And during that time, were you getting deeper and deeper into TM?
I was for a while, but then I stumbled across Zen, and it really changed everything. Because I'll tell you what, there's one key point that I didn't yet mention, which was that I had a random, dare I call it, like awakening experience, a sudden epiphany when I was 19 years old. This had happened to me, a sudden moment of discovering that I was part of everything. Like, instead of being a separate self, there was one great whole reality, awareness reality, and that's what I was. And that's a lot I could say about that, but it was a sudden moment of discovering a completely different dimension of my existence, where I wasn't a separate self. And it was incredibly liberating. It was just overwhelmingly wonderful when it hit, and that had a kind of aftermath for several weeks. That was very, very beautiful. Being just living in a kind of bath of love kind of thing. And this was all stone cold sober, by the way, in case anybody's wondering. And but I was away at the time, away from home, and I went back home after several weeks in that condition, and had a really difficult re-entry. But I mention that because when my late 20s, when I'd been doing TM for a while, and I was traveling and writing, and that's when I met somebody who was a serious Zen practitioner. And they kind of exposed me a little bit to Zen and to Zen writings, in particular, a great 13th century Zen master and poet and writer called Dogen from Japan. And I heard a bit of Dogen's writings, and suddenly I just had this sense that he knew about what I'd experienced when I'd been 19 years old and had this revelation, if I can call it that. He understood that. And it was kind of an intuitive sense. I couldn't exactly explain it, but I just was sure he did. And I was sure that Zen knew about it. And I started doing Zen meditation. I got trained in it by a Zen guy and started doing it, started doing retreats. And more I got convinced, there's no question. These people know what that was, and in some way it's informing what they do. And that was the most important thing for me. Once I realized that this amazing thing that had happened, there was a path to maybe experiencing it again, but more than that, maybe learning to live it. That seemed like the great the great thing, the most important possibility of a human life, was to find what our real identity, if I could call it that, what we really are. It seemed like that was what I'd been wanting all along, was to find out. I had this glimpse when I was 19 that I'm not really who I thought I was. I'm something far wider, greater, more beautiful, more expansive. I mean, it's not really me. It's like by not being who I think I am, I find my real life, my real participation in this unbelievable, all-inclusive, beautiful, whole reality. That's what I really am. And I'd seen it and then kind of lost it. But I suddenly, hitting on Zen, I realized they know about it. And I was right. They do. And so I got into the Zen thing, and sure enough, started to have now and then, well, I had various points had sort of more glimpses of this incredible dimension of our human consciousness, awareness, reality. And the Zen path was a one to try to learn to move toward living it, not just glimpsing it, living it. And that's the path that I've been on ever since. And I know Zen's not the only path to it, for sure. And I've pursued some others, got interested in others as well. But there's something very sincere and authentic and patient, genuine about Zen's way. It's time-honored, it's been passed down for thousands of years, and it's solid. It works, Anyway, Jesse, I keep feeling I'm talking too much. I'm sorry.
No, this is beautiful and a lot to unpack there. I want to come back and talk about the timeline. So this happened at 19 when you had that awakening. What was your meditation like at that point? Was this before TM or just in the beginning of TM?
Yeah, no, I had none at all.
Okay, so this awakening then, is it something that is happening from your experience? Like, does it happen to a lot of other people without meditation? That glimpse, again, not living it day to day, but that glimpse. Because personally, I can't say I've had that experience, and I've been on the planet for 38 years now. So what was it about you at that time without getting into the meditation that allowed you to have that, and how common is it?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I mean, obviously, I don't think anybody really knows how common it is, but I know that it happens. And based on the people I meet in the course of teaching, I hear of people having, something like that without any practice, without any prior practice, now and then. It's not like, wow, that's incredibly rare and unique or something. No, it does happen. The issue, I think, is, look at, let me see. I would say, first of all, it's actually going on all the time. What in a moment like that, we're seeing something that's here all the time. It doesn't seem like that because that's not what we experience normally. But that level of our experience is actually present all the time. It's just that normally we kind of contract into this sense of being separate. And we kind of, in a sense, can't help doing it. We've been conditioned and have conditioned ourselves very strongly to do it. And it seemed like an absolutely vital thing to do, and we can't stop doing it. But actually, we can stop doing it. And it's a habit we have of feeling like a self, of making ourselves feel like a separate self. And that can be interrupted And of course, practice can be one of the primary methods for interrupting that. That's been one of the reasons why meditation has been practiced and is still around over the millennia. But the fact is, what somebody glimpses in a moment of awakening is not, it's sort of not special, actually. It is here all the time. I mean, it's special in the sense that it's rare for us to experience it, but it's not special in the sense that it's some amazing condition that's been engineered specially. It's here all the time. It's just unusual for us to experience it. And it's probably more unusual for us to experience it without any practice, if you see what I mean. So that would be my response to that question. Like, how common is it to experience it without practice? I guess nobody really knows, but probably it's not going to be that rare. But here's the thing. It's like, okay, it's great to experience it, to discover this other dimension, so to speak, of our life. But if we don't have a way of living it, of integrating it, of living from it, it can just become a kind of an amazing thing that happened to me. Like, man, I had this amazing holiday, and then 10 years on, that holiday was a thing that happened. It's not happening now. Whereas this kind of momentary glimpse of another dimension of our self, of our reality, it's not a holiday in a place that happened 10 years ago or 20 years ago or whatever. It's a reality of this moment, now. I mean, Jesse, you and I chatting, and it's here now. So the point of practice, yes, it can be that whole therapeutic thing we were already talking about, but it can also be to sort of part the clouds a bit, see, the blue sky is still there, or to undo the habit of contracting into a sense of self, sense of me with my story. What happens if I just drop the story right now? Just drop all ideas, drop all problems. Imagine no problems right now. What's it like? Drop all notions, drop all ideas, drop all stories now. Just this as it is, And when I say this, I'm not referring to something special. I mean just what's happening now, but without stories, without problems, without thoughts of past, thoughts of future. Just this. And maybe you just get a tiny hit, just a little tiny glimpse of, oh yeah, some weird kind of peace in there. Sort of vibrant, alive peacefulness. Maybe just a tiny hit. And so that would be a little, pinprick through the veil.
Well, that kind of reminds me of back to what I was saying earlier. Reading your book almost gave me that little bit of a pinprick through the veil, where it's caused me to be more present and to kind of look at the world a little bit differently.
Well, it's great, very, 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 can I say gratifying for me to hear that. Thank you.
And it's interesting the way I'm seeing this and the way you're describing it. It almost seems like a filter that we, the general population has over our eyes at all times when we're not in this awakened state. And I'm just curious, and there's probably no good answer for this, but how much of this comes from the time we're in now and the conditioning of being brought up in the conventional way of the 21st century versus, say, thousands of years ago when things were totally different. We didn't have the technology we have today, and we hadn't evolved to this point. I don't mean it like an evolution, but like our technology and all things we do day to day, was this more of a natural state is what I guess I'm getting at back in the day before the influence of the 21st century?
It's a good question, and thank you. I mean, all your questions have been great, really, but here's my take on that. The first thing I'd do is I'd look at the fact that a lot of this kind of meditation practice and guidance in it comes from 2,500 years ago. They needed it then as well, apparently. Secondly, if we can maybe just do a little sort of layperson's foray into human evolution. We as a species, we as I'm sure you'll know, we evolved these larger brains. We learned to cook food so we get much more energy. Didn't have to spend hours and hours chewing all day. We got bigger brains, more calories. The calories went into the brains. The social groups got larger. It seems, there's a theory anyway, that one of the big functionalities that became possible with our thicker prefrontal cortex, for thinking, cogitating, imagining, was that we could run models, like simulations, rather than simply doing the next thing. We could actually pause and imagine what happens if I do this, what happens if I do that, if the antelope are over there and there's a lion over there, whatever, and there's 5 of us hunting, running simulations, like thinking about the future. And then apparently also we could use these prefrontal cortexes to rehash the past, to think through. They think actually, especially it may have been around interactions with other humans, that we would go over interactions we'd had. We'd go over interactions we might want to have or that might be coming, we might not want to have, and actually use our capacity for imagining the future and sort of reliving the past to navigate more complex social life. This is a theory, okay, that I think is quite prevalent. And as that's going on, the sense of self is growing stronger, because the sense of self is essentially a story. It's a character in a narrative. We create a sense of the future. We create a sense of the past. And in both cases, there's a character in them, me. And, if you take away time, take away past, take away future, that narrativized story of me is hard to maintain. It's like, okay, right now, imagine, just drop the past, drop future. Only now. Just for now, don't worry, we can pick them up again. So don't worry about it. But just imagine if we just right now, no past, no future, now. Then what am I? It's kind of something different. So I'm saying this in order to suggest, I guess, that I don't really know that there was some marvelous past where humans were in this state all the time. Because the thing is, if you go back far enough where there probably wasn't a narrative sense of self, sense of me, then awareness is really different anyway. It doesn't have the self-awareness to be able to be aware of how it's experiencing things. You see what I mean? There's a Buddhist idea that we're in this sort of ideal condition as humans. We're better off than the gods, and of course we're better off than the hell realms, they call it, because we've got a certain amount of suffering, but we've also got a certain amount of awareness. And you need both in order to have this possibility of awakening. In the Buddhist view, the best possible thing in the universe is to awaken and realize essentially that you're not separate, you're everything. because you're not what you thought you were. Instead, you're everything. That's the most amazing thing in the Buddhist view that there can be, possibly, is to realize that. And it's true, and it's real, and it's here and now. And, I'd say, modern neuroscience is starting to catch up with this awakening experience. What does it look like in brain scans and MRIs? And they're starting to find it. And it is looking pretty much like optimal mental health, Anyway, yeah, Jesse, how's this how's this striking landing with you?
No, it's beautiful. And what it brings to my mind, you talk about getting rid of the or being in the present, getting rid of the future and the past, and this being of oneness with everything, and being inseparable. But even in the present moment, zoomed in right here and focusing in on us in this conversation, I still have boundaries. I still have skin. I still have a physical form. How do we account for that?
Yeah, no, absolutely right. I mean, the one way to look at it, a working model of it would be like there are simply different levels of experience, consciousness, awareness. There are different registers. And absolutely, on one level, I'm contained by this skin bag, as it's sometimes called. This skin bag is my particular responsibility to, feed and clothe and keep healthy and so on. And there's other skin bags moving around me, my partner, my children, my family, my friends, colleagues, workmates, and all of them I want to help and support and treat the best I can. Then there's wider communities, and I want to check that my community isn't disadvantaging other communities, and work to change that if it is, And so there's a level of experience that isn't actually negated by what I'm saying. It's that's not the whole story. There actually are other levels of reality. And if we taste them, it may be profoundly beneficial to how we are and how we treat others. To find this sense of this great belonging, and to realize that everybody is part of it without exception. It changes our priorities. Even being a skin bag, it'll change our priorities.
Well, I want to come back to your story and your first taste of awakening. And you mentioned there quickly that it was a bit abrasive, or there was some friction coming back into the quote unquote real world after that. So talk about that experience. You mentioned how this got you excited to learn more and figure out what that was, and you had a little taste. But talk about the other aspect of it too, where this is something, it's probably hard for you to talk to other people about. Maybe others in your life, likely they wouldn't have had this experience to relate with you. So talk about having that experience, then coming back into quote unquote the real world.
Yeah. Well, look, if I could just talk about it generally a bit first, and not so much in my own story, because I see this a lot with others, and it can be difficult, actually, because we've discovered something that we just know to be true, and in a sense even seems more real than our normal way of seeing things. We sort of sense that very strongly when we have one of these experiences. But man, it's so different, and how they typically, this kind of sudden awakening, because there's also gradual awakening, by the way, but sudden awakening hits hard typically, and it's brief, but has a long, long sort of afterglow, and tends to kind of fade. So the it can be difficult to realize, man, I found the answer kind of thing, and now I've lost it. That alone can be difficult. Then it can be difficult because, like, well, what on earth was that? I know in some way it's true and real, but I have no idea what it was. And what am I supposed to do about it? That can be difficult as well. So, I mean, the formula that addresses this, that helps with it, is when you're in a real serious path of practice, you have hopefully a guide and you have a community. And both of them are fellow meditators, fellow practitioners. And both of them with support will give you a sense of support, so it's not so difficult. In fact, it can be a great, great blessing if you have those pieces. I personally didn't, because I didn't know what had hit me. I only knew that it was sort of in some way true. So I didn't really think I'd gone mad. I might have done, I suppose, but what was very difficult for me was that I didn't just have it sort of gradually fade. I went home, and because I was so open from this experience, very, very sort of, heart wide open, when I went home, having been away, I suddenly was confronted in a way I had not really been before by the suffering that I'd experienced in my childhood. And it really hit me very hard. And I had a kind of, I think, some sort of a nervous breakdown, actually, in a way. And it took years to come through it and start getting help psychologically with therapy, and then also with meditation as a key piece of my healing. But in a way, it really, it wasn't really till I got into Zen that I started to really find a way of revisiting that experience and starting to realize that there was a path to actually living it, not just having it be a flash in the pan.
Well, let's get into that. Let's talk more about your Zen journey and continuing to poke holes in the veil of awakening.
Once I got into Zen and started to connect with guides, teachers, it became a whole different deal, because it wasn't all down to me. There was help, and there was a way, a path to follow that wasn't. Yeah, it was about developing in terms of awareness, but it was also about learning to be patient, learning to be more steady. It was also about, the whole emphasis in Zen. One of its merits, I think, as a path is that it just has so much emphasis on living it, not just like going off to do a retreat and having some mind-blowing experience, and then you're back in normal life. Zen is, at least the kind of Zen that I've been trained in, is so integrated into leading, like an ordinary life, not a monastic life, but a regular life, and yet can have really deep experiences and, really deep discoveries about who we are in the midst of work, family, friends, etc. So it took a weight off everything, because there was company, fellowship, and community and guidance. This is one other aspect, I guess, of the meditation app phenomenon, is that, yeah, you may get guided meditations, but you don't get a coach, a live coach. So, I've been actually, one of the things that I've been kind of beginning to work on for our website is to have, this sort of beyond the app offering. Like, maybe somebody's done quite a bit of meditating with an app, but now they really want to connect with somebody, a guide, a coach who can hear where they're at and say, well, hey, try this. Often one conversation with a meditation coach, and it tweaks your perspective, it tweaks your approach, and you're good for 3 months. And there's more and more to learn as we go, and these experienced guides that I was so lucky to find, man, they made a difference.
And along your journey through Zen, I'm not sure exactly what point it was, but you're a married man now. And I'm just curious, throughout dating your wife and now being married, has she delved deep into this realm the same way you have? And if not, how do you navigate, going so deep into awareness and consciousness? And then how do you like tie that into a relationship where the other person might not be as deeply into it?
That's a great question. I mean, it's so nice because, she's very, very supportive. She meditates a little bit herself regularly, but, daily, but not. She just hasn't had the same sort of intensity about it that I have, the same deep curiosity about it. But she really, supports me in it, always has. And she says she sees great benefits for her from it, that I've become much, much nicer to have around. That's what she says. So take that with a pinch of salt. But I'm relaying what she has said. I could be a very, very difficult guy. And I think I've become, on the whole, less difficult. I think I can claim that. I think she would agree with that. Let me put it that way. So there's that. But, here's the thing. If it's for real, it shouldn't be like we're checking out, like we're going to some other. I know it may sound like it. I'm talking about these great, amazing dimensions we can discover, but they're here. They're not in some other land. They're right here now. And if we're really getting it, this is where it shows up, is now in our life, in our hearts, here and now is where it shows up. So, yeah, it should only really help now rather than create some disjunction with our life, I think if we're living a really unwholesome life, it would be problematic to maintain that. Meditation will show us. It's like a barometer. That's one of its functions as well. It's we'll sit down and we don't feel good at all. If we haven't been living wholesomely, meaning reasonably ethically, not harming, then, because if we have, we'll sit down and probably be uncomfortable about it, and we'll notice we haven't got the distractions that could normally keep feeding us and distracting us from how wholesomely or not we're living.
And I know you've referred to the fact that it's something you're bringing into day-to-day life, but there are also these profound moments, at least during the journey to get to that point of awakening. And I guess just having those and having a partner, maybe, I don't know if your wife has had those awakening experiences or not, but just being able to articulate it with your partner and somebody else to have been there through that journey with you and relate to you on that level and discuss. I could see how if one person took it really far and the other person wasn't as into it, it could be a challenge to kind of relate on that level.
Yes, it could be. But to be honest, it just hasn't been. I think in some sense, she just hasn't needed it. She's a very different temperament from me. I'm quite I've been a poet and a writer. I'm sort of kind of a somewhat sort of a high energy, sensitivity sort of guy. And, she's much sort of calmer and steadier. And so I think maybe in a way we're different temperaments, and we're lucky that it works well together. Like we each have something to offer, perhaps that the other doesn't, and somehow it fits really well. I don't know. But I also think, honestly, Zen, meditation practice like I've done over the years, it makes us more tolerant of whatever. It makes it easier for us to be with how things are, roll with it. It certainly has done that for me. I'm sure I can say that. It's like, so it's this way, so fine. Like, rather than life must be this, or she must be that, or my partner must do X. No, I think it's part of the fruits of this kind of practice is that we get more accepting of the way things are, and we respond to how things are more than, darn, it should be another way.
And you share a number of these profound awakenings examples throughout the book, but there's one I definitely want to make sure we talk about before we part ways here. And this is one, I forget the exact terminology used, but it's an awareness death. There's death as part of it, where you had traveled back to London and you were working with your old with John, your old person that was training you, and you just had a really profound experience in meditation. And then you had this experience with John where you were kind of meddling over what you'd been through. So take us through how that one was a little bit different, a little bit deeper.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, it is a sort of possibility in the Zen tradition. I guess they've hit on something that I'm sure shows up in other traditions, that apparently there can be some sort of profound moment when somehow it seems like, I'm hesitant to talk too much about this. I know I did in the book, so let me just try to, since it's in the book, I have to say something. It's like, I don't want to scare anybody. That's why I'm hesitant. One way you could put it, let's say, is that for a moment, the entire construction of our life collapses. Now, that doesn't sound particularly good or nice when I put it like that, but it is the most beneficent, benevolent, beautiful thing I suspect that we can go through. I wouldn't be surprised. And it's like the whole system of me and world, and even of Zen, of training, of awakening, of the whole thing, everything just is gone. And yeah, sort of comes back slightly different. And I mean, for a long, long time after that moment, I felt that it never ended. Like, that moment was still here. It was as if time had stopped, time had vanished, and thereafter, whatever happened was just that very moment unfolding, opening, expanding, flourishing. It was like that for years. Incredibly beautiful to taste that all the time, pretty much all. No, probably not absolutely all the time, no, but most of the time, much of the time. But I have to say, to be honest, now it's a little different, actually. I kind of, I know that in some way it's sort of true still that, there was this decisive something happened, that after which everything's been kind of different. That's still true. But I've got to say, I don't think about it so much. And I don't really mind so much if I sense it or not. It's like, I don't know whether this is a step back or further evolution or something, but I think that there's a way that our path in life, if it's really freed up, it doesn't ever stop. Everything, even that, keeps evolving. I don't know quite what to say, Jesse. It's It seems to have been a very important thing that I personally went through, and it was the tipping point for me. It was like prior to that, life had been a certain way, all of it. After that, it's been different. It's like a whole story ended, and it's been new since then, and kind of ever new. That's still true, actually.
And how many years has it been?
Well, right now, God, it's been actually 13 years.
And for you, it sounds like, well, you're saying it's such a beautiful thing having these awakenings and living them day to day. But do you ever think like, it's too bad that I got into this and opened the bag and now I see the other side and see what's in there and now I can't go back to what quote unquote lay people are going through? It's hard to articulate what I'm getting at, but like now that you've seen this other side and there's no turning back, it's like your life is forever different and beautiful in your case. But is there ever a little bit of an inkling like, I've opened that bag now and I can't go back to quote unquote what regular people and regular living is like? Or do you know of other people that have experienced that?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it wouldn't, in a certain way, I'm going to try to figure out why, but in a certain way, it wouldn't make sense to, because um, all this is coming closer and closer to reality, less and less story based living, more and more being able to live without story or without being entranced by stories. One key story, of course, is me. That doesn't mean it wouldn't be right to say that I sort of somehow don't know what other people are going through or something. That's not quite right. I mean, I've been on my long journey which had suffering in it, and I still have very, things come up in my life with our boys, for example. Difficulties, real major difficulties that are very, that they're facing, and that can be very difficult for us as their parents to know what they're going through. And then we look around our world, and it's so full of suffering, and there's people who are refuse to recognize that, and amplify suffering, and do harm, and cruelty and brutality and oppression, and we live in a system of oppression, and there's a lot of suffering. And it's not like, I don't think it's like, somebody who's on the path of awakening is kind of turning their back on that. It doesn't seem to be that way. It seems like but maybe it's like the more we kind of somehow, I don't know, you know, change our own relationship with our own suffering, the more that frees us up to be concerned about the suffering of others. And it's not like the heart goes cold or contracts or something. It's the exact opposite. It's the same thing I was talking about at the start. This, to me, it's all about opening up the sluice gates of love. And but that love, what it drives us and wants us to do, maybe we become more sensitive to that. Maybe we surrender to that more. We let ourselves be guided by a love that, we don't exactly know where it comes from. It just keeps welling up. And we want to be in its service. We want to be guided by it. And we know that basically it wants to heal the wounds of this world to whatever limited way it's able to. And, we want to be in the service of reducing suffering, reducing harm, alleviating pain. So we're not checking out, right? I mean,
No, I get what you're saying. I guess it comes from a naive position of not having been through one of these experiences and wondering like, life is forever different now. It would have been so much easier to not have opened that door. That's what I was
Okay,
getting at.
I see what you mean. But actually, I've got to tell you, it's so much easier now. It's so much easier. Oh man, the struggles and strife and miseries of trying to engineer life to be the way we want it, and caught up in greed and desire and envy, and oh man, it's such a relief to have less of that. Occasionally a little bit bubbles up and we can see it, we let it go, we send it on a nice journey. It's so much easier. I mean, that's a big part of what this is about, is to have an easier life.
That makes sense. And thank you for giving us a window into, what that looks like behind the veil, and a little tidbit of what that life looks like. And now people can decide if that's a path that they want to choose and go deeper into. And I know you got to go. This has been a fun conversation, and Henry, I've really appreciated your time and sharing your story. And One Blade of Grass is, like I said at the beginning, just such a beautiful read. And I thank you for putting your heart and love into that book, and sharing your message with everybody.
Oh, hey Jesse, thanks so much for having me on your amazing show. I'm really honored. And yeah, it's been really nice to get this time with you. Appreciate it.
I really appreciate your time, and I have a lot more we could get into. Hopefully, we can have a round two down the line, and catch up on our ongoings, and dig deeper into your story, because you got a lot to share.
Well, I'd love that if you'd ever like it. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, Henry.